Hey everyone, Warwick's here. Happy Midnight. Releasing this full release of Midnight has officially launched, so congratulations to those that have already hit level 90 if you were playing early access, and for those of you that are just starting your journeys on the day of this video's release, I hope you enjoy your journey to level 90 in Midnight as well. I've got my Demon Hunter there, my Evoker is almost there, and then I'll be working on my Monk not long after that. But today's video is the first in a series of spec guide videos. Today we're going to be doing Devourer Demon Hunter. We're going to do these specs in alphabetical order, so Devourer, Havoc, and then Vengeance will be the next three coming up. And these are going to be level 90 guides. So this is going to include everything you need to know to get yourself started with raiding and Mythic Plus in Midnight. Now, the one thing I do want to point out is that my guides are intended and aimed to be at more beginner or intermediate level players. If you're an advanced player or someone that's already thought deeply about Devourer or Demon Hunter, there may not be a lot in this guide that you will necessarily find valuable, but maybe if you find even one small thing useful, appreciate the likes, the comment, and subscribe on this video. But my video is more aimed at people that maybe don't know exactly where to get themselves started at and hopefully build from there. Now, in these videos, what I do is I discuss the talent builds, I discuss your rotation, your stat priority, your chance and consumables, and then we look at weapons and trinkets that you should try to target for Devourer Demon Hunter in this season. Now, one thing I do want to do that I generally have not done before, but I want to make this something that is moving forward common, is I want to talk about the general strengths and weaknesses of Devourer Demon Hunter. So from a strength perspective, I think that it does have really good mobility. So obviously you have Shift, which can have 2 to 3 charges depending on the build that you run. You have Vengeful Retreat, you have your normal glide, and you can, for Devourer, you can cast Consume and Devour, your main builder spell, while on the move. So the spec is very mobile. It is going to allow for you to reposition quite easily without losing too much in the way of damage. Now, your channeled spells like Void Ray and your casted spell in Collapsing Star, you cannot move while you're doing those, so you do have to be wise about how you plan out the movement in order to maximize using those abilities when you can. But everything else does allow for you to be very mobile and on the move. Obviously, the class to me is one of the most, if not the most, visually pleasing and aesthetically pleasing spec in the game. The Void visuals are amazing, and to the point that I think Blizzard should do another tuning pass on all the specs visuals to try and help bring a lot of them up to the level of what Devourer Demon Hunter is. There's some specs that I think are already there, like Elemental Shaman and Demonology Warlock, for example, in my opinion, are visually pleasing, but a lot of specs aren't there quite yet. You do have really good healing, or really good defensives in 2 charges of Blur, and then you also bring Darkness to the table and Chaos Brand, so you have really strong group utility that is valuable in almost every situation. And then your damage profile is very consistent with really good high damage windows in Void meta, and then even outside of that, they've done a lot of work to make the damage feel not as lacking. It obviously drops off from when you're inside Void meta, but it's not as like peak and valley as it was when the spec was first introduced in pre-patch. Now, from a weakness standpoint, I do think that for some people, the 25-yard range is a problem. If you're a long-time range DPS player, you've played a lot of Mage, Warlock, or Moonkin, and you're coming to Devourer Demon Hunter, you're going to find the 25 yards a little bit difficult to adjust to, especially if you're someone that was always used to standing at or close to your max range. Now, I've played Evoker for many years, so I don't think much about the 25-yard range, and I've been a melee player for many years, so actually having a little bit of a gap between me and the mobs is actually kind of weird sometimes. Some people don't like the aspect of things like Void Blade and Vengeful Retreat having to go into melee and things like that. So if you're not a big fan of like the Scarred build in particular, you may not find yourself always enjoying that particular playstyle, but luckily for you, there is another playstyle that avoids a lot of that. And the spec itself does not necessarily have the most dynamic gameplay. So it's got what I call a race against your resources type build, which if you're a veteran WoW player and you played in Legion, if you played Shadow Priest in particular, you may remember the Surrender to Madness gameplay. Devourer plays a lot like that did, except I think it's a little bit more refined than what the Surrender to Madness playstyle was back in Legion. And so you're not really reacting to a ton of procs. You get like your Voidfall meteors if you're playing the Annihilator build, and that's it. There's no other procs that you really have to react to. It's all about consuming your souls, being consistent with using things like Void Ray on cooldown, and getting as many collapsing stars out as you can, because that's the entire buildup of the spec is to that one particular ability. So if you're looking for like a really dynamic rotation, Devourer Demon Hunter is not going to give that to you. You'd be better off if you're sticking with Demon Hunter to play Havoc, or if you're looking to play different casters, even something like Devastation Evoker or any of the other casters is probably going to give you something that is a little bit more dynamic than what Devourer Demon Hunter is. So to me, that's the strengths and weaknesses of the spec. I expect it to make a very good first impression in this raid tier. I think it'll be largely the spec of choice in raid situations, and I think in Mythic Plus, I think both DPS specs are going to see a lot of play. The Devourer obviously being new and fitting into like a wizard comp a little bit better, and also still being ranged, may provide that sort of flexibility. Plus, with it having a 15-second melee kick timer, it makes it one of the more valuable ranged DPS out there. So I predict it'll be seen quite a bit across the board at all levels of play, but it is not without its drawbacks. Now let's talk about the talent builds. So there's a few talent builds that I want to kind of discuss here, and I'm not going to go over like every single talent, but I kind of want to point out the main themes of these talent builds. So this build right here is a Void Scarred build that is designed for raid. It is a pure single target raid build, which is why you see things like Hungering Slash not being taken in this build. And you'll notice that even though it's a Void Scarred quote melee playstyle, we're taking a lot of the talents on the right hand side of the tree. That's because Blizzard did some last second tuning and adjustments, and with the Midnight Apex talent now being into the play, Collapsing Star has become the main point of the spec overall, regardless of playstyle. So this build does rely heavily on things like using Voidblade and things like that. Now, this point here, some people will take Reap, some people will take Duty Eternal. I think it's flex point. You kind of pick and choose which one you want. I'm going to try out this build initially and see how it works. And then I'll try out one with Scythe's Embrace, probably on like a progress to progress pull, so that I can kind of get a vibe for which one I feel does better. Now, with the Scarred Demon Slayer, you're basically wanting to make sure that you're getting into Void meta and doing what you can to empower your Voidblade. Now you may be asking, why don't we play Soul Glutton in this build? It's more about the fact that you want the haste so that you can get even more Collapsing Stars, because now Devourer Demon Hunter is all about Collapsing Stars, whereas in pre-patch there were builds where you weren't even taking Collapsing Star so that you could maximize your melee proficiency, but that, at least in pure single target, is no longer the case. So this build, kind of the main way that you would play it is that you're going to Voidblade on cooldown, and then you'll want to Vengeful Retreat out, and then make sure that you're consuming, making sure you're casting Void Ray on cooldown, and then Void Metaing when you hit the 50 soul fragments, and then you're in that resource race gameplay against your own resources, making sure that you can get there. Now with your Apex talents, making it so that a Collapsing Star always critically strikes and gets extra damage based on your critical strike chance. The big one is rank 3, where it allows your Void meta immediately generated 5 fragments and gives you an immediate access to a Collapsing Star. Plus this talent here, Impending Apocalypse, making it so that each Collapsing Star you cast increases the damage of your next star. So between your Apex talent giving you an immediate push on something like Impending Apocalypse and running like a very high haste mastery build, you're going to be able to potentially get maybe 3, I've seen even people getting 4 Collapsing Stars out on the beta raid testing. Obviously we'll see when the raids go live. As I record this, that is still 2 weeks away, but the build is much more focused around that, and you just use Voidblade as a way to get in. Now that does mean you get launched into melee range, which sometimes means you'll have to hold on your Voidblade usage in order to make sure that you're not griefing your melee with other mechanics. In the class tree side, the biggest talents I think to make sure that we're grabbing are, of course, you're going to grab Voidblade and Vengeful Retreat, but the most important ones I think for raid purposes are going to be Demonic Resilience, making sure that you gain that additional blur charge. You want to make sure you gain Pursuit, give you a little bit more movement speed, because you're also gaining Blazing Path with the additional shift charge, Fellfire Haste giving you movement after that, and then you get an extra 20 yards here through Guile. This obviously is a huge talent. And then you're grabbing Furious and Remorselessness, because it makes it so that abilities that spend Fury deal more damage and abilities that generate Fury deal more damage. Consume and Devour and Reap generate damage, Void Ray spends it, Collapsing Star spends it. You're just going to be in a good spot, and then of course you're getting this. And then of course Darkness is going to be valuable because it's a good raid cooldown that if you're in an organized group that tries to organize your cooldowns, you want to make sure that you're doing that, because it allows for just that straight up damage chance to just be avoided. It's a really, really good cooldown in specific cases. For the choice nodes in the Void Scar tree, obviously you want to grab Movement per Fury because Void Nova is not going to have much in the way of value. You don't do any fire damage, so you're always taking some improved Soul Rending to give you that extra leech, because you do grab Soul Rending here, which gives you that 10% passive leech. And then you grab Hungering Slash here, but you can also grab a Student of Suffering, which I think you should actually take in this build since you don't grab Hungering Slash. So you want to grab Student of Suffering to make sure that you're gaining that extra mastery when you go through those Void Ray windows. Now, if you don't like the Void Scarred playstyle at all, there is a build that does allow you to run Annihilator, and it is quite close in damage. In fact, I would say the drop-off isn't that major, so if you have a preferred playstyle, you can run this build. Biggest difference is here that you skip something like Sweet Suffering, so you can grab Gift of the Void, which gives you more critical strike chance, therefore more damage on your collapsing stars, and then you just continue to run down kind of the same talent build. These are really the only changes that get made here. Now this build is a pure more caster playstyle. You will not Void Blade in under any circumstances. You still have Void Blade because it's granted for free, and you can use it as a way to close the gap, because the funny thing is that Consume has a 25-yard range, but Void Blade has a 35-yard range. So if you find yourself having to run out for a mechanic and you want to close the gap quickly, you can use something like Void Blade to close the gap so that you can get back into range quickly to start your Consume and or Void Ray spam. Now this playstyle, the one thing you do want to keep an eye out for is your Void Fall. You want to make sure that once you reach 3 stacks, you have Reap going. Now you don't get the 2 charges of Reap or the hasted cooldown, so you're going to sit on your 3 charges every now and then, but luckily, you know, you'll have something like Phase Shift, which gives you extra damage taken, or damage reduction while you still have it up. And then what is it here? There's one other one here. Yeah. So this, you get Final Hour. So like all the passive bonuses that you gain, which gives you, you know, the extra 2% damage taken mostly, is going to be good. And then you get the extra haste as well from your 3 stacks. So if you have to sit on your 3 stacks for a little bit, it's not the worst thing in the world, but you do want to use them basically as quickly as you can. There will be links to these talent builds in the description below, so you want to take a look at that. And finally, if you're wanting to run a Mythic Plus key, small talent changes is the only big change that you're taking is that you're losing usually want to grab Eradicate. And Eradicate here basically makes it so that your Reap does like a conal damage in front of you. Really, really good for Mythic Plus, obviously with lots of mobs. And then the other good thing is that with Reap is that every time you fully channel your Void Ray, your Reap cooldown gets reset here, so that you will always have a Reap after you do a Void Ray. So makes that damage a little bit more consistent. But other than that, I mean, the class tree doesn't change a ton because you kind of have to grab all your Mythic Plus utility, because there's a lot of talents that are just pointless. Like, we don't do any fire damage as Devourer. We don't have Immolation Aura here. So like some of these talents that you would normally take for something like Vengeance or even for Havoc, it's just, you don't throw Glaive ever. So a lot of the talents in this tree that you would normally grab for Havoc or Vengeance, they never apply to Devourer. So your builds aren't going to necessarily change all that much. So I'm going to start with the Annihilator rotation gameplay. And the Annihilator rotation gameplay is actually really, really simple. So you're going to basically go until, you know, you're going to start off with 25 souls, and then you're going to build up. Now, like I said, you can go and consume this. You will be doing some of this as you go, and your goal is to basically get to 50 as fast as possible. You can see I'm at 41. We're going to drop that to get to 46, and you can see we're at max fury, so we're going to Void Ray. And then we'll grab some of this, and you can see we got our Void Meta. We're going to pop into Void Meta, Collapsing Star. And then we're going to Void Ray again. And then Reap, and we're going to grab all those souls, and you can see we're already at 25 for our next Collapsing Star. And then you go right back into Collapsing Star. And then you're basically in the race. So you're going to Void Ray on cooldown because it generates a ton of souls for you. You can see I'm already back up to 18. And then you're basically just here trying to spam Devour, doing what you can in order to get to 30 again. And you're Collapsing Starring again. This is the gameplay rotation. Your goal is to keep this Void meta for as long as humanly possible, so that you can get as many Collapsing Stars out. And as you can see, the longer you're in it, the more your thing spent. So I got 3 out right there with basically no buffs. and go from there. Now, if you have any sort of specific trinkets, you want to make sure that you use them when you enter void meta, so you may want to macro them into void meta so that you have that extra damage when things go out. But that's really it. And then from the more void scarred single target playthrough, you're basically just going to Void Blade right before you enter Void Meta. So you'll Void Blade, get out, cast Void Meta, and then go. And then after that, you're basically going to make sure that you are... So it'll be the same gameplay here. So just looking at this. See, we're up to full fury. And then we're back to full fury. So we're going to gather this soul, void meta in, boom, collapsing star, and then we're going to void ray again because we want as many souls out as possible, and then suck them all up and go from there. And then you're back into the race gameplay. So inside, you're basically not really spending anything on this until you get to Pierce the Veil, which gives you that Hungry Slash, and then you're going to want to get out after that. But that's really the only difference, is that you're going to make sure that you cast Void Blade and Pierce the Veil. I got to fix my cooldown manager on this one. But that's really the only difference, is that you're doing that. And you're continuing to play like the race against time, gameplay loop. That's really the only difference, is that you're adding in that one button. But other than that, your gameplay loop is basically the exact same. And the same thing will go for Mythic Plus, honestly, because... because you're there. Now, there is like a full melee build, but right now it's just, I think it falls a little bit too far behind. So I'm not going to discuss that in this video, but it is there if you want to discuss it. And maybe I make a short video on using the full melee build, which is a very good build for when you're doing like low dungeons or low keys where things aren't going to last very long and you don't get a chance to really build your ramp. It's really good if things like die within like 30 to 40 seconds and stuff like that. All right. So let's talk about your stat prio then as a Devourer Demon Hunter. So it's going to shift a little bit, but you're in terms of what you want more of. But the reality is that you are a haste mastery class, and you kind of want the number to be roughly equal. And obviously I'm in fresh leveling gear, so our stats are all over the damn place at the time of recording. But I'm going to work on getting more haste and then more mastery. Crit does still have some value after they made a change to the Apex talent to where you gain that extra crit damage based off of your critical strike chance. So if there's a piece that has crit on it, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to get crit. You kind of just get it by accident and go from there. And then versatility is like way down the list. It just doesn't hold a lot of value. And really Blizzard's kind of in a weird way designed it so that versatility isn't really useful outside of very specific specs that are tanks, but mostly it's a PvP stat at this point. We're basically just three secondary stats. So knowing that should impact how you get your enchants and your consumables here. Now, the enchants, obviously we're going to be dual-wielding glaives, which are going to be useful. For the enchants, you're going to want, on your main hand, you're going to want the Arcane Mastery Glaive one, which basically gives you a chance to increase your mastery by 124 for 15 seconds. And then Berserker's Rage gives you the haste proc. So unfortunately, with the way that gearing is right now, you're going to want war glaives that are specifically designed for, if you played multiple specs, you're going to want glaives specifically for each one. But if you're only playing Devourer, then you just grab some haste mastery glaives and you put these on each one. Now, there are extra enchants this expansion that were not there in the past. So there's a helm enchant now, which does the same thing as what the wrist enchants and the cloak enchant from the War Within did, which gives you leech, avoidance, or speed. You can grab avoidance mainly because you don't really need the speed. You also could technically go leech if you want to really lean into the self-healing. It's really just kind of a pick your choice. Enchant chest, you're going to want the Mark of the World Soul enchant, which gives you primary stat. Always going to be super valuable. There's a shoulder enchant this time around, which, same thing, it gives a tertiary haste, leech, or avoidance. You can grab any one of those that you want. I recommend a Mirrorseal's Grace, which gives you the avoidance. On your legs, you're going to want the Sunfire Silk Spell Thread, which gives you the intellect and stamina, same as we've had in the past couple of expansions. On your boots, you're going to want Lynx's Dexterity, which gives you stamina and avoidance. But again, I think there's a leech one in stamina as well. If you want to lean heavily into your leech, you can definitely do that. And then for your ring enchant, you're going to want either mastery or haste, kind of depending on which stat you need more of. Like right now, if I were enchanting rings, I'd be enchanting haste on them. But there may be a time where I'd need to switch over and swap because I have, say, 700 haste rating, but I only have 500 mastery rating. I would need to switch over to mastery. I'd gain more value out of that. From a gemming perspective, there is a gem called the Flawless Masterful Peridot, which gives 12 haste and 5 mastery. That's generally speaking going to be your best gem. And then there is an Indecipherable Eversong Diamond, which is your primary stat gem. You're going to want one of those, of course, in your setup. From a consumable standpoint, from your friendly alchemist, you're going to want to grab Flask of the Magisters, which gives a mastery boost, or Flask of the Blood Knights, which gives you a haste boost. Again, just depends on which stat you need more of. Potion of Recklessness is going to give you your highest secondary stat while losing 232 of your lowest secondary stat for 30 seconds. So obviously in this case, you're going to have haste or mastery be really high, and losing out on 232 verse, not the end of days. You want to make sure that you have some Silver Moon health potions on hand because they're the best health potions right now in the expansion. So hit up your friendly alchemist for those. They should be able to make those right now, actually, even at very low ranks of alchemy. Your weapon buff, you're going to want the Thalassian Phoenix Oil, which much like the Algari Mana Oil, gives the crit and haste. And then your augment rune, if you can ever get those, will be the Void Touched augment rune. And then for food, you are either going to want the healthy Keldori Medley, which is going to give you 98 stamina and 65% of your highest secondary stat, or if you're making your own food and you don't have the feast, basically, you'll want to grab Champion's Bento, which gives you 64 of your highest secondary stat for that 1 hour, and you can make that hearty as well. All right, let's talk about some of the trinkets and the weapons that you're going to want to target. Let's start with weapons. And this is going to make the assumption that all of the raid content and stuff like that is out. So from the March on Kel'Danis, from the Midnight Falls, the last boss of that, there is this Lightless Lament. It's a Warglaive that drops off here. This is going to be one of the best ones. You're going to want this probably on all 3 specs because of this equip, which basically gives you cosmic damage split between all enemies. With additional enemies. So this is going to be just like the best one. If you can get this Warglaive, you're going to want to grab it on the highest track possible. Obviously it requires Mythic March on Kel'Danis in order to get it on Myth track, but even at Heroic track, I still think it'll be one of the best weapons that you can get in the game. The other one that you want to look for is from the Void Spire, and that is going to be from the Light Blinded Vanguard, which is going to be the Blade of the Blind Verdict, which is an intellect sword, so it doesn't necessarily work as a Warglaive that you can swap between, but given the stats on it, it's the stats that Devourer wants. So again, another one that you can go grab. Now this is going to come out of the 6th boss raid, and it's off the second to last boss, so we want to make sure that we are killing this on the highest possible level. So Heroic, obviously Mythic, in order to get the Myth track, but this is going to be a really good offhand weapon for you to chase if you're a Devourer Demon Hunter and you want that alone. And then of course a crafted weapon that's haste mastery statted is never going to be a bad idea as well. So you always have that option in the back pocket, especially if you are able to get things like enough gilded crests to craft that without having to, before you get into this item, potentially on like Mythic track. All right. Let's talk trinkets, because there are some options. The first one, and I think the one that is going, like, there are 2 that I think stand out across all of the bosses here. The first one is coming out of the Dream Rift, the 1 boss raid. That's going to be Gaze of the Almseer. So this gives you mastery when you want it, which obviously you like, and then you gain intellect when you have it, when you deal damage or healing. Like this trinket for any class that likes these stats, you're going to be competing with them a lot. So most casters, because most casters like their mastery. So this is going to be a very much a trinket that you're going to be competing a lot with, but this is a boss that I think you should be getting in and killing ASAP so that you can get their loot into your vault, so that you can either loot this off the boss or loot this off the vault. The other one is going to come from Veilgore, which is out of the Void Spire. And that is the Final Stare. So this makes it so that this is an unused trinket, so you can macro it into your Void Metamorphosis. It gives you a bunch of mastery that diminishes over time. Allows you to see the hidden enemies, whatever, but you also gain primary stat out of a trinket slot. So these two trinkets, I think, are by far the best trinkets available in the pool. And those are the ones that you want to make sure that you're chasing the quickest. That said, there are some other ones that if you can't get your hands on those two right away, you can use these other ones that I think are going to be pretty good without actually having to like break your neck trying to pray for a raid drop. There is one other raid one that I think we should talk about here, and that's the Void Spire. And that's going to be coming off of Crown of the Cosmos. And that's this Locust Walker Ribbon. Again, big mastery when you equip it. Gives you a chance to gain intellect when you cast your spells. But then, you know, it increases and ramps up. So this one is one that's going to be really good if you're in the longer the raid fight goes on, the more valuable it's going to be. The raid fight, if the fight or in Mythic Plus, this trinket loses a lot of value because it diminishes quickly out of combat, which means that you're not going to be able to sustain that unless you're like chain pulling. So that's another one that you could grab that I think would be really good for raid purposes, but I still think falls behind the Final Stare or Gaze of the All-Seer. Now, the two out of the dungeons that I think are really good as well, a little bit behind the two that I think are definitely the best. The first one's going to come out of Windrunner Spire, and that's off of Emberdawn, and that's this Emberwing Feather. Basically, this is on use that gives you a bunch of haste, and then you're going to get a chance basically for it to reduce another secondary stat by 120 for 10 seconds. So there's a little bit of risk reward where if you gain a bunch of haste but then lose a little bit of mastery, could potentially end up being a wash DPS gain wise. And it's on a 2-minute cooldown, so it's a longer cooldown, which basically means depending on how quickly you can get back into void metas, you might only have this every 3 or 4 void metas. But still a pretty good trinket, because obviously a bunch of haste, especially in a Mythic Plus situation where you are playing a more caster oriented build. That's going to be really valuable for things like faster cast on Collapsing Star and faster cast on Consume, so that you can constantly win the race against your resource bar. The other one actually comes out of this dungeon as well, so congratulations, you're farming Windrunner Spire. Hopefully you like it. And that is the Heart of Wind. Heart of Wind is a passive trinket that just basically makes it so that you gain a bunch of haste for 10 seconds, basically on your spells and abilities. Really good passive trinket. Like I said, I think it is pretty good. I don't think it's as good as the other two, but if this is the trinket that you have sitting in your bags, or you grab this one and you don't already have the Final Stare or All-Seer, I think you should be very happy to have this trinket sitting on your person. It is really good. If I had to classify Final Stare and All-Seer on like a tier list, it'd be S tier, but then the Feather, Heart of the Wind, and the Locust Walker trinket I think are the A tier. So those are 5 trinkets that I would go after and target for Devourer Demon Hunter. So that is Devourer Demon Hunter for Midnight Season 1. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more. I do stream. I will be maining this class for my raid team, so I'll be streaming this spec quite a bit in both Mythic Plus and raids if I'm not tanking Mythic Plus. So if you want to join me and watch some Devourer Demon Hunter being played in action, twitch.tv/WorksTTV, or here on this YouTube channel, I stream to both platforms. So make sure to like, share, subscribe to that, or follow me over on Twitch. Until the next video, hope you all stay safe. Hope you enjoy yourself. You're having fun. You keep on gaming, and we will see you next time.